Wait, what happened?
We should be good.
We're not live right now.
Definitely are.
Really? Okay.
Cool. Oh, well, we lost Mitch. Solid start to the pod. I'll go ahead. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, we might have him back. We might be fixing problems. All right, here we go. We got Mitch back.
All right, we're back. I don't know what happened. Uh, we'll just chop this off on the podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Week 7 recap. Garrett and I are riding solo on this show. Trey is still coming off an emotional high, I think, from visiting the Capitol at night. What a trip out east it was for him. Early red-eye flight. He's catching some much needed rest and relaxation this afternoon. Garrett and I are going to take you the width of the Week 7 recap, technical difficulties or not. Garrett, I'm really excited to talk Pac-12 specifically. It was a fantastic weekend, at least from an entertainment standpoint. I think some of the results for the conference didn't exactly go the way they wanted to. I'm looking at you, USC. But overall, we've got a lot to talk about. Washington, Oregon was an absolute classic, and a lot of other headlines to get into as well.
Yeah, man, it's really exciting to, be in this time of the season, right? We're at the point in the season where games start mattering a little bit more. We get to a point where, we start to break down these games and we can actually talk playoff implications, not, stuff that's going to happen in 3 or 4 months, but stuff that like, hey, we're getting into the back part of the season and losing these games starts to matter. And I'm really excited to see kind of where the season goes from here because I don't know about you, but I thought yesterday and this weekend overall was one of the crazier weekends we've had in college football in a while. Just a lot of unexpected results, a lot of teams that I thought would play a lot better not playing better. Some teams looking really, really good out of nowhere, and I'm just kind of excited to see where it goes from here and kind of how we finish this crazy college football season.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it all got started. Coastal Carolina upsetting Appalachian State all the way back on Tuesday night. You had West Virginia losing on a Hail Mary to Houston. You had Colorado giving up a historic loss to lowly
Oh, it's so
Stanford.
crazy.
We'll talk about that coming up. But first, of course, have to thank our friends over at the Transfer Portal CFB. Love writing, participating, collaborating with them on a whole bunch of content. Our newest article, Headlines and Review for Week 7, will be going live later today. So be sure to head on over to their website, check out that. Also, shout out to homefieldapparel.com, our friends there creating some of the best apparel, logos, college branded, whatever on the market. You will love how soft their t-shirts are, how great their retro designs are. You can use code 3TechPod for 15% off your entire first order. Garrett, let's jump right into it, man. Washington outlasts Oregon in an absolute classic. It was a thriller on a Saturday afternoon. Washington wins 36-33. This was a battle between two incredible quarterbacks. It lived up to the hype. Michael Penix Jr. throws for 302 yards, 4 touchdowns. Bo Nix throws for 337 and 2 touchdowns. Or I should say, Penix throws for 4 touchdowns. Nix throws for 2 touchdowns. Oregon rushed for 207 yards. We thought that was going to be a big key to watch. Can Washington's defense stop Bucky Irving, not Bucky Richardson? And how are they able to win the battle in the trenches? Honestly, they did that in the first half. Oregon kind of took control in the second half. It really felt like the Ducks were going to run away with this late in that ball game, but a couple of key moments, Oregon's inability to convert on 4th down, for me, that was the big turning point in this game.
Yeah, Mitch. I mean, if you look at the stats that we have on this slide, Oregon was the better team pretty much all day. I mean, it's if you look at just the consistency, if you flipped on at any certain point in time in this game, you were going to see Oregon being the better team, right? Winning the down, winning the situation. But there's 2 big reasons why Washington ends up winning this game. Number one, you kind of mentioned it, the 4th downs, right? Oregon going for it 3 separate times, including once like inside the 10-yard line where they could have kicked a field goal right at the end of the half. And if you look at that final score, that field goal might have mattered a little bit. And then also once at the end of the game where they could have punted away and given Penix Jr. a longer field to cover. And instead, they try to step on the throat. I love the aggression. Don't get me wrong. I love the aggression from Dan Lanning and co. But it did not pay off today. And your second primary reason why I think Washington wins this game is they don't have to be better than you for, 75% of the game because they're so explosive, right? They're just so explosive that at any point in time, they can hit a long pass, they can, find a big score out of nowhere, and they can, just completely bury you in just one or two plays. This is something that they can do that I think a lot of teams across this country cannot do quite as effectively as them. So that, it doesn't matter if they get beat, right? It doesn't matter that they didn't rush for 100 yards. It doesn't matter that, technically speaking, Bo Nix outpassed Michael Penix Jr. All that matters is at the end of the day, Penix has 4 touchdowns and is able to score effectively. And the Oregon Ducks, they scored plenty fine, but they just weren't able to find, the little things, right? Take advantage of those little moments on the field.
It was a game of inches, and Washington was able to capitalize in some of the bigger situations. Obviously, the fourth down stops were gargantuan. That final drive when Washington only needs 33 seconds, 2 plays to score what ends up being the game-winning touchdown. Rome Odunze afterwards said he and Penix kind of nodded towards each other on that final offensive snap, and Rome knew the ball was coming his way, that it was going to be a fade into the corner of the end zone. I finally, Garrett, I've waited for a long time to resurface that preseason thread where I got all kinds of hate for being the only person I think on the planet that picked Romo Dunze to win the Bolitnikoff Award. Everybody and their mother was picking Marvin Harrison Jr. And today was the day, right, to resurface that, to bring that up, to just pile shame on the haters' heads, because Odunze had 8 for 126, 2 touchdowns in the biggest moment, right? He did not disappear. He didn't fade into the background. He didn't let Oregon's focus on him prevent him from being a difference maker. And to me, that's why Odunze is going to be my wide receiver 1 going into the NFL draft next season. Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably the most talented wide receiver on the planet, but what Odunze is able to do week in, week out against the biggest competition, he hasn't disappeared in a single game yet. And for me, yes, he's in an awesome scheme, an air raid that is designed to put up gaudy numbers, but there's nothing fluky about this, right? This is not either a bunch of tunnel screens and just racking up yards after the catch. This isn't a bunch of in-breaking slant routes. This is big boy football, route running, breaking away from a defender. And it feels like half the time just going up and being the better athlete, right? And so for me, Odunze is a guy that makes Washington a national championship contender. Liam Blutman, the author of No Context College Football, asked us for a bold prediction during our preview show on Wednesday night. And I tweeted back to him, Odunze goes for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns in a statement win. It's exactly what happened.
Yeah, man, it looks like you were, preseason, you weren't trying to be different like a lot of people were accusing you of. You were just trying to be right. You're just trying to get that one accurate. And look, you called your shot and, looks like it's paying off. And that's not to take away. This was, in my opinion, this game was such a battle of stars. That's not to take away from anything that Oregon did. Obviously, you kind of mentioned it. Bucky Irving had a fantastic game on the ground for Oregon. Bo Nix was great on Oregon's side, but Troy Franklin, the wide receiver as well for the Oregon Ducks, had a great game in his own respect too. 8 catches, 154, and a touchdown. He was a huge weapon in that game. And I was surprised at how, kind of effective at the end of the day both teams were in all phases. To me, this looked like a game between 2 of the best teams in the country. And, I'm going to go ahead and say, and I don't think this is necessarily a hot take at this point, but I think this is going to get rematched. I think we're going to get to see this one again in Las Vegas when they play this one for the conference. And I'm excited for that because I think that Washington's home field did play a part in this. I'm not saying that Washington's not the better team, but I think the home field helped in spots. And I'm really excited to see neutral field. I want to watch this one again. I want to see, kind of what ends up, like, how do these two teams make adjustments for each other? Because it just seemed like they were both just so back and forth. And, I think there's a good chance that these are 2 of the best 4 teams in the country. I don't know if they'll get rewarded like that, but there's a chance that these are 2 of the best 4 teams in the country.
On a neutral playing field, these 2 teams match up again, Washington or Oregon?
I think it's so hard to repeat things. I would pick Oregon on a neutral field. They typically say that home field's worth about 3 points. And that ended up being a difference there, and also a pushed field goal, which, man, just got to feel bad for the kid. Regardless of the outcome, regardless of who wins, loses, you hate it to be like that, where, you storm down the field, you give your team a chance, and you just barely push enough of a field goal, and it ends up on the kicker. So you hate to see it, but I do think that if this game were played on a neutral field, I would probably pick the Oregon Ducks to end up winning the rematch, because if you do look at the total yards, you look at the way that both these teams played, the difference was the fourth downs. I think Dan Lanning would kind of play a little bit more conservatively in the way that he, kind
Yep.
of picks his spots, right? Just saying like,
Yep.
hey, it's the end of the game. Go ahead and kick that thing down the field, right? Make Michael Penix Jr. beat you. And he might. Michael Penix Jr. might beat you, right? Because he's just that level of good and they are that explosive as an offense. But make him do it. Put the ball in your defense's hands. The defense, by the way, that played pretty well. Both these defenses played really well. Both had a sack. I think both had like 4 tackles for losses. They're doing a really good job kind of keeping the respective offenses from completely exploding like we're used to. But I think neutral field, I'd probably lean Oregon just because it's really, really hard to repeat and beat a team like this twice in the same year.
Yeah, I hope we get the rematch.
Love to see it.
Certainly don't know that we're going to get much opposition from the next team on our slate. Formerly, the artist known as the 10th ranked USC Trojans, they got exposed as frauds yesterday. I will not apologize for that take. Coming into this game in the preview, I said that I just didn't believe that Alex Grinch could get it done defensively for USC. That didn't actually end up being the X factor in this game. It's number 21 Notre Dame throttles USC 48-20. Caleb Williams threw 3 interceptions. USC had 5 total turnovers, and they not only gave up 6 from a scoop and score to Notre Dame, they also allowed a 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. The defense really didn't have a chance to screw things up because the offense and special teams was already doing it for them. USC was never in this game. Notre Dame punched them in the mouth immediately. The weather, the home field advantage, Audric Estime, it was all too much for a USC team that I think we questioned their toughness a little bit, or at least I did. I think you picked the Trojans in the preview, but ultimately USC not able to go on the road and get it done. USC's offensive line looked horrific. It was beyond bad. USC could not protect Caleb Williams, and that ends up being a big difference in the reason why there just was no real offensive threat in this game. Do you believe this is more stock up for Notre Dame or stock down for USC?
This is stock down for USC. This is just USC is not as good. And look, I think Notre Dame is a really, really good team. But if you look at the stats, you look at the breakdowns that we have, they didn't do anything particularly well. It
No.
wasn't like on offense they were crushing it. It wasn't like, oh man, look at us. We're really running the ball effectively, or we're just blowing them up in the air. It just came down to 5 turnovers, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles. 5 turnovers in a game, that you're not going to win too many games with a -5 turnover
Yeah.
margin. That's not going to be a game that you typically win. And look, I did pick USC to cover in this one. I said
Yes,
Notre Dame would
that's right.
win, but USC would cover
That's right.
because I said you can't disrespect Caleb Williams. You can't disrespect what they can do on their offensive side. Turns out you can. All it takes is, and look, this might be a hot take here, but all you got to do to stop Caleb Williams and stop USC's offense is make them play a Big Ten style football game. And I know what I'm saying there because they're going to go join the Big Ten. But when the weather got bad and when you really just needed to grind it out and you really just needed to find a way, they couldn't do it. They had no answer for not what Notre Dame was doing. They had no answer for the elements. They couldn't get out of their own way. Right. And this isn't anything to take away from Notre Dame. I'm not trying to say that Notre Dame's a bad team or they didn't deserve to win the game or anything like that. You win a game by a large margin like that, you deserve to win.
Yeah.
But it's just Notre Dame knew probably from the previous several games, they've had to play this kind of grueling slate they've been going through. They knew that they had to bring their A game. They had to find ways to tough it out. They've had to, for, another couple of times, really struggle through tough situations. USC hadn't had to do that. They just gotten by, Arizona, who looked really good. And we can talk about them later, but they just kind of survived that. I don't think that this is a very good USC team. I think it's a great offense, but I don't think this is a very good team. And I think once you can get them off their offensive rhythm, they're going to shut down. And you saw that happen on Saturday.
There's not a lot to be gleaned in a positive light from this performance for the Trojans. You look at the remainder of their schedule, and this was the first real team with a pulse. Now, Arizona pushed them to the brink. Colorado nearly came back. We highlighted the defensive struggles, their inability to cover in the secondary in both of those games. The Arizona win looking a little bit more legitimate after they thumped Washington State, a ranked Washington State team, 44-6. The Colorado win looking really lackluster after what the Buffs did. We'll talk about them or just mention them in a second. But the first real team, the first real road test that you go have, you get the doors blown off. And now, Garrett, versus Utah next week under the lights on Fox, you play a plucky Cal team on the road. You host Washington, you go to Oregon, and then you host UCLA. Am I crazy for thinking that USC has 2 more losses on this schedule?
You might argue that they have 3 more losses on the schedule. I mean, I would say for sure, based on what we just talked about with Washington and Oregon, that's probably 2. But
Yeah.
I think Utah's got a great defense, so they go play a great defense. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe Utah's able to take advantage of that and kind of throw them off their groove. They're certainly better, I think, than what Arizona is, and so I think that they could take advantage of that. And like you said, Cal, kind of a plucky team. They can certainly run the football at Cal. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking this could be a bit of a tough end of the year for USC. And then you've got to start asking some questions. I know that, we've both been down on Grinch, but it's not like this has been a it's not like this game gave us any confidence in the offense. I don't think that you can say that this game really strengthened us offensively and our opinion of USC at that point. So, is it just taking advantage of a bad situation? Is it a one-off? Maybe, right? It could just be a one-off. We could be looking up next week and say, "Oh, USC scored 50 on Utah. Okay, cool. They're back on track." But I just think you got to start asking some questions and saying, what happens when you don't have an all-world quarterback to run this offense?
That's very fair. That's very fair. The other question that came to mind based off of this is, does a 10-2 Notre Dame have any shot at the playoffs? And initially you think, well, no, probably not, especially because they lost to Louisville. They got absolutely hammered by the Cardinals. Couple of turnovers in that game. I think 5 total turnovers in that game. Three picks from Sam Hartman, right? So not a great performance. And then Louisville goes and gets housed by Pitt, who had 1 win on the season, right? So that automatically is a bad loss. But all things considered, if you're able to take this win now in stride, you beat Clemson in a couple of weeks. I think there is technically a shot that they can be that 4th seed. Now, do they need help? Of course they do. They absolutely do not control their own destiny. But if you can get Oregon with 2 losses, if you can get Washington, maybe you need the Pac-12 champ to go undefeated, but you have Texas suffer another loss. You have Oklahoma suffer a loss before going into the Big 12 championship game. You need help around the league, right? You need Florida State to drop a game. But I don't see why Notre Dame, with wins over USC, Clemson, and then a quality loss, quote unquote, against Ohio State, where you were right in that game until literally the last second. I don't see why Notre Dame couldn't be at the top of that pecking order to get in.
Yeah, I think situationally that you're really having to kind of jump through some hurdles to make it happen, but it's not, I don't think, out of the question. The issue I think for them is, number one, they're not going to be able to put a conference championship on their resume,
Sure.
and so that's kind of the big issue for Notre Dame every year, right? You can kind of get away with 1 loss, but even with 1 loss, it's going to be difficult. And then after that, you kind of have to say, well, you need Washington probably to be your Pac-12 champ, and you need them to be undefeated, and you need Oregon to have 2 losses, and probably Oregon State and USC and all them to finish with 2 losses. you probably need, like you were saying, Oklahoma's got to drop a game and probably not win the conference. I mean, you're probably not getting in over a one loss Texas conference champion if they ended up in. You're probably not getting in over a one loss Florida State conference champion, and so that's kind of the issue here. Is even if you get like a 2-loss conference champion, they still get the conference championship on the resume to kind of bolster their playoff resume. And so while Notre Dame might be deserving by the end of the time, by the end of the time we get to this, and by the time we hit December, we might be talking about Notre Dame being one of the best teams in the country. I still just don't think it's there for them this year. I think that you can't drop 2 games if you're not playing in a conference, which is really their problem. If they were in the ACC, or if they were in the Big Ten and they were playing in a conference championship game, then they could maybe argue that case. But since they're not, they don't have that to bolster their resume.
Well, let's look at the final game in our Big Three slate. That was number 15, Oregon State, taking down number 18, UCLA, 36-24. Now, look, I don't know that Oregon State is going to actually threaten the Pac-12 conference championship. When you look at their remaining schedule, at Arizona, at Colorado, versus Stanford, versus Washington, versus Oregon, they should be just a one-loss team going into that final 2-game stretch. When you do host Washington, you do host Oregon. Oregon State, to me, is that girl that no one really paid attention to in high school, and then all of a sudden she's blown up, right? Out of nowhere, you're like, wait, who is that? Oh, it's Oregon State. And I wrote in our article for the transfer portal that the Big 12 and the Big 10 are going to regret passing on Oregon State, right? They got asked out. They got asked to the prom, and both the Big 12 and the Big 10 said, it's no, we're gonna sorry, I'm busy that night. I've got a cough. My grandpa served in World War II. I can't. All the excuses. And yet, the Big 12, especially, I think, is going to regret not taking an Oregon State, a Washington State, because you look at what their new members are doing right now, and this is not a projection going forward necessarily, but the Big 12 has stunk this year. It's been brutal football. We're going to get down to it towards the end of this preview or recap, I should say. We're going to talk about a couple of those headlines, but really there's nothing to break down on a national scale other than Oklahoma State suddenly having a resurgent. They knocked off a ranked Kansas team. But every other team is just getting beaten, battered, and bruised on a week in, week out basis. And yet here's Oregon State, nearly a top 10 team. They're bringing in historic recruiting classes under Jonathan Smith. They're defending top 15 rankings against very, very good in-conference opponents. And they're going to put themselves in a position to be within striking distance of a conference championship. The Big 12 can't say that they have that 4, 5, 6 teams deep. Heck, the Big 10 can't say that they have that right now, right? They're going to get Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. I get all of that. But Oregon State is going to be that X that you had, that old date that you passed on, that you went, if things were different, I wonder if it would have worked out. Oregon State is here to stay, and they're going to make the Big 10 and the Big 12 regret it.
Well, and they're certainly looking good. I think my big takeaway from their game yesterday was how they were able to, win a little bit differently than their normal schedule is, right? Their normal schedule is they're a run team. They're going to throw effectively, but they're going to be real balanced on offense, and they're going to try to wear you down. They didn't run the ball, I think, that effectively. They did rush for 133 yards. It's not bad, but not bad. Rushing, just not their best effort, but they passed 282. DJU actually looked pretty good in this game. I thought, at least. I thought he looked pretty solid. I thought he was starting to kind of get flashes of some of his high moments at Clemson. And suddenly you're looking at Oregon State. They're competitive. They're, pushing for something really good in the Pac-12. And it's not out of the question that they could compete for the top of the conference, right? They're right there with them. They've gotten ahead of their in-state rival Oregon, who suddenly has a conference loss.
Yep.
And wait for a couple of things. They can control that. I mean, they currently no conference losses. You play Oregon, you play Washington. If you go beat those two teams, which you beat Oregon last year, then all of a sudden you're talking about a trip to a conference championship game. And, I think that would be really, really cool. And I think that you're right. I mean, this is a really solid team, a really solid program, and they're in a good spot. They're going to have to capitalize, right? They're going to have
Mhm.
to, I think, finish this year really strong and sort of make some headlines. But if you can do that and you can capitalize with the transfer portal class, you can capitalize with some decent recruiting, and you can put a good product on the field next year as well, maybe smash up whatever your schedule ends up looking like, because that's still a huge, waiting to be seen. But whatever that schedule looks like, if you go smash that up and you go, let's say that next year they're playing mostly Mountain West Conference teams. If you go 11-1 or 12-0,
Mhm.
then you're all of a sudden looking like the big guy out on the West Coast. And I think that, yeah,
And
you
you're in
can
the
start to
playoff.
enter in a playoff, dude. So you can leverage that, and you can start to kind of push and I think they're in a good spot. Now, out of this game, another interesting thing that I noticed again, Dante Moore,
Oh,
another pick six. That's
3 of them.
it's tough. He's got a lot of talent, but they're asking him. I think they're asking him to do a little bit too much right now, and I think the game's a little too fast for him. But look at the rushing yards. I mean, they
Yeah.
ran the ball all over the yard. Carson Steele had a great game, and so I'm excited to see where they can go as well. I'm just not necessarily as high on them, I think, this year because of the Dante Moore limitations. I think if
Yeah.
he can turn the corner, you never know. But, they can certainly run the ball effectively. So we'll see where this goes from here. I would just like to make the point once again that they're taking this conference from us. We just talked about 5 Pac-12 teams,
I know.
and we're going to talk a lot more. All the good storylines, it seemed like this weekend, were from the Pac-12. They're taking that from us because they couldn't figure out how to put a TV deal together. And I think that that's a tragedy. And I think everyone involved at the Pac-12 should be ashamed of themselves for losing this conference.
Oh, I mean, again, just more shame heaped on the legacy of Larry Scott for putting us in this position. Can you imagine if Oregon State hadn't lost to Washington State up on the Palouse? Like an undefeated Oregon State team, a 10-0 Oregon State team hosting Washington
Could you
would be
imagine?
electric. Setting up the Platypus Cup or whatever they call it now
Yeah,
against Oregon in the series finale. Now, listen, they've got to play a very dangerous Arizona team. They've got
right.
to play the ultimate wild card in Colorado and a Stanford team that has a pulse, right? We'll talk about them in just a second. So to say that they just automatically cakewalk go 3-0, that is not an assumption that Oregon State should make. It's an assumption that I can make. But the Beavers certainly can't, because if they do, they will drop another game. I'm just saying, boy, if we could have dreamed about an undefeated Week 11 matchup with Washington, that would have been just sublime. Yeah, elsewhere around the Pac-12, guys, we tried to warn you about Colorado, right? We tried to warn you about Colorado in the preseason. It was some of our most engaged with content that all these new Buff fans I didn't know existed were coming out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, what are you guys talking about? You don't know ball. Dion's going to revolutionize this thing. Have you seen the roster? They're going 9-3 at minimum." Garrett, I don't think Colorado can make a bowl game now. Do you?
Look, it's not off the table, but they just lost to a really bad Stanford team. Like, this is not a good Stanford team. And man, I'm not optimistic about their chances on the way out. Look, I ended up watching that game. I stayed up to watch that game here. It
God
was it
bless
was
you.
a late one. I mean, look, I was having a nice night in on a Friday, right? Me and the wife, we were, kind of having a nice evening and just hanging out. And then I remembered all of a sudden, wait a minute, hold on. Colorado's playing Stanford tonight. I forgot that that game was the Friday night game. So let me check and see, what's going on in that game. And I flip it on. It's halftime. It's 29-0. I'm like, oh, okay. So Colorado's back on track. I don't need to watch this one. I'll catch the highlights later. And then as we're starting to go to bed, I go check back. Okay, well, how much do they win by? And all of a sudden, this is a game.
Hmm.
Like, it's still going, and this is an actual football game. And look, I mean, this was a fantastic effort from Stanford. One of the best catches I've seen for that touchdown in overtime. That was a fantastic catch, catching the ball on the back of Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
And Travis Hunter had him stuck. He was glued to him. And he just turns around, nope, catches this thing on his back. I mean, fantastic job. It was, I mean, almost jumped up and screamed. And I was in bed at that point. I almost jumped up out of bed and screamed. That was such a good catch. And then to pick off Shadur Sanders in the end zone to get the ball back, couple of run plays and you kick the field goal, ice in the Stanford kicker's veins, and ice on the imaginary wrists of the Stanford players
Oh,
afterwards. I mean, just
brutal.
the disrespect. And look, they earned it because Colorado talks. And so
They
if
did.
Colorado's going to talk, they got to back it up too. And if you're going to lose to Stanford, that's a problem. Is Colorado going to make a bowl game? They could. They have talent on their roster. They can beat some bad teams. I just don't know where the bad teams are left on the roster or left on the schedule. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what you can expect them to win at this point. If they're going to lose to a team like Stanford, and are they running out of gas? Is it starting to come unraveled? Have people figured out what Dion's doing? I don't know what it is, but they got to get it together because that 4 game start to the season is starting to look like we could end it. We could finish at 4 or 5.
Well, I'll tell you what the issue is. It's their defense. The defense sucks. It's some of the worst defense I've watched. And we have to watch it because, it's on Fox or ESPN in prime time every week right now. But their defense is terrible. And that is without a doubt the thing that's holding Colorado back. Shadur Sanders had another great game,
Yeah,
400
he's great.
yards, 5 touchdowns. The offense isn't the problem. It's the defense that's going to stop them from making a bowl game this year. Uh, Malik Ayumanor, I think is how you
Yeah,
say his name, the wide receiver for Stanford, just an electric night. 13 receptions, 294 yards, 3 touchdowns, a career year for him. Career game. It was the worst lead blown in Colorado history. They were up 29-0 at the half against a Stanford team that had one win, had no pulse coming in, and they couldn't do anything about it. That defense just got railroaded in the second half. They lose 46-43 in double overtime.
yeah, and just to clarify, even though he had the 97-yard touchdown pass
Yep.
that he caught, it was kind of the catch and run where he just got free and took it all
The
the way.
slant from the 3-yard line.
Yeah, just no problem. And then the 60-yard pass as well later in the quarter. That I mean, an electric game. Obviously, the touchdown in overtime as well. That was his third. Just an electric game from him and an awesome effort from Stanford. And look, I don't want to take anything away from Stanford, but they're not a great football team. And to be able to put up an effort like that, they're clearly playing inspired. They clearly, came in ready to play, and they stuck with it, right? They stuck with it. They had some really tough situations early on. They obviously didn't play fantastic early, but they stuck with it. They kept playing. They got there, and currently, if you look at just the conference standings, Stanford is technically speaking a little bit higher than Colorado in the rankings because they have the
Yikes.
tiebreaker. So, look, it could be tough sledding for Colorado. I think that they're a little bit exposed at this point. I think that people know what they want to do and they know the weaknesses. And yeah, you're right. That defense is just garbage. It's just not a good defense. So we'll see. We'll see what happens on the way out.
Well, yeah. I think Colorado is going to start losing the prime time slot here.
And
I've got them going 5-7. I can't get them to bowl eligibility right
well,
now.
on the way out, the schedule is at UCLA.
Yep.
Gotta think that's a loss at this point with the way that UCLA runs the football. I mean, unless Dante Moore throws a bunch of picks,
Yes.
that could be your issue there. But with the way UCLA runs the football, they can just control the clock, control the game, and score a bunch on them. They can't stop the run. They don't have anything
No,
inside that can stop the run.
no, they can't.
Oregon State, that's a loss. Arizona's playing really good football right now. I'd say that's probably a loss. Washington State, they've got an electric offense. They can certainly score and keep with Colorado there. And then they finish the year at Utah. Utah's got a really, really solid defense,
Yeah.
and Colorado does not. So they could legitimately finish with one more win. Maybe Utah if
Maybe.
they can't score. Maybe UCLA if they throw a bunch of picks. But now you're having to ask a lot of the other team before you can actually count yourself, I think, a victor in any of those games.
All right, let's move on over to the ACC. And really the headliner there was North Carolina winning 41-31 over Miami. Garrett, this was the lone pick in my ledger that actually hit the over on this one. Head on over to Twitter if you would like to see just the comedy of errors that ensued with my ledger picks this week. But North Carolina 41, Miami 31. Tez Walker has a breakout game. He has 3 touchdowns in a triumphant return. Again, kind of further solidifying in my mind that Drake May is a dang good quarterback, maybe approaching QB1 levels. in the draft class of next season will decide kind of on who's one, who's two between Caleb Williams and Drake May. But Miami gets exposed again, and after beating Texas A&M, it seemed like Miami was back. That this team had the goods to win an ACC championship, to finally pay off. The long standing question, is the U back? They're not. They're just not. Mario Cristobal, to me, Mario Cristobal and Jimbo Fisher are very, very similar, right? They're almost allergic to winning the big game right now. And when it comes on the road, it's really not going to happen. Now, Cristobal's not any better at home. He hadn't won a conference game at home yet in his time with the Canes. But honestly, until Miami can start actually picking off ranked opponents, to me they're irrelevant a little bit. This was a big time win for North Carolina. North Carolina was 1-10 going back like 20 plus years in ranked AP games at home. And finally, Mac Brown's able to get them another win. This was a statement victory, and I think UNC is absolutely, kind of team 1B, maybe with Florida State in the ACC.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, especially with Louisville losing. I mean, that puts them in a really good spot. But look, I mean, North Carolina, I know there was some concerns around Drake May towards the beginning of the season. You can throw all that right in the trash. That's not a concern anymore, and especially because Tez Walker is making his life a lot easier. And so, I have to think that things are going to get better for North Carolina. But look, kind of like you were saying, you think Miami is irrelevant. They're plenty relevant. You just can't trust them. You just can't trust Miami to do anything, right? They have 0 conference wins this year. They're 0-2 in ACC play. You think that they're doing something good. You think that they're, finally, on the verge of a breakout. Now we're going to get things rolling. And then, they don't just kneel the ball. They don't just, come out and stay focused and then come out with the big game on the road in North Carolina. They can't do that. And so I start to wonder, well, what can you trust out of Miami? I don't think you can trust anything that Miami's got right now. And that kind of sucks to say because they've certainly put the investment in their program. They've certainly tried. They brought in Cristobal. They got plenty of, NIL going on and trying to keep these players home and trying to, put good talent on the field. They're doing it. You just can't trust them right now. They're not there. And so I don't know. I don't know what the fix is, but I'm also not the guy getting paid to do it. So, I would hope that things get better for the U, but looks like for this season, it might just be a can't trust you situation.
I agree. Louisville gets embarrassed by Pitt 38-21. They just couldn't get on a roll in this game. That was a lackluster performance, the ultimate letdown after throttling Notre Dame a week ago, right? I mean, this is the classic trap game, and Pitt gets it done 38-21. Listen, I think this is one of those clunkers that you lose. It stings. It's embarrassing. It takes you out of playoff contention. But Louisville is ultimately headed in the right direction. I think we're really excited to see what Jeff Brom does at his alma mater. Duke proved that they're still a contender with a 24-3 win over NC State. This was a win without Riley Leonard, who now Duke gets to go into the bye and hope that Riley can be healthy in 2 weeks' time. I believe they play Florida State coming out of that bye week. So Riley Leonard, a chance to maybe play when he comes out, dealing with that high ankle sprain. But this was a big time win against a very solid defense for Duke with a backup quarterback.
Right, and a huge game for Jordan Waters, who is clearly, I think, the 1B option in that Duke offense when Riley Leonard's healthy. Jordan Waters had a fantastic game, 13 carries, 123 yards, and a touchdown. Just really, really good stuff from him. And look, it wasn't an explosive offensive effort for Duke, but that defense, man, it just clamped down. A field goal in the first quarter and nothing else for NC State. So you got to really admire what Elko's doing there with that defense to really put them in a good position to win games. I think that they're going to have a really, really good season even still. Again, you got the one conference loss. You don't want that, but you're 2-0 in the conference, and you can still play for this conference. And if you're a one-loss conference champion by the time all's said and done, you go to the playoff. So they're still in control. It's not over for Duke. I'm not saying they will do that, just to be clear. I'm just saying that it is on the table for them to have that kind of a season, and they can still play for something, right? They're still playing for the whole thing. So stay focused, keep playing well. And if you keep playing football like that, you're going to win a lot of games in the ACC.
Let's go over to the SEC now. And listen, the SEC certainly feels like they've taken a step back this year as far as number of elite teams. We've questioned on this show, is anybody in the SEC elite? I don't know that we have the answer to that question quite yet, but Georgia starts their week by beating Vandy 37-20. Shout out to the Doors, by the way, in this one. Ken Seals, his third straight start for the injured AJ Swan, keeps it close, keeps it competitive. Heck, Vandy had lost the previous two meetings 117-0. So to even force Georgia to sweat a little bit, especially Carson Beck threw an interception. Vandy took it all the way back down to the one, ended up converting on that. Huge props to Vanderbilt playing in the middle of their construction project. For Georgia, what's more important though is they lose Brock Bowers with a left ankle injury. They do have a bye week to get him healthy. I don't think it's going to be too serious, but Georgia really needs Brock Bowers to be healthy. 567 yards, 4 touchdowns this year. I know they've got just a wealth of tight ends, but Brock Bowers is an X factor that makes that offense go.
Yeah, Brock Bowers is different. Like he just is a different type of player. He's made of something different. He's a different level of talent. He's going to be very successful in the NFL for a long time. That's going to be what you have. You're going to be saying, "Wow, man, Brock Bowers. He's like the new Travis Kelsey, the new, Rob Gronkowski, the new whatever. He's going to be that guy. I'm just convinced of it. He's going to be fantastic. But look, this is still no excuse for Georgia. You're playing Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is not very good at football, and this was a 10-point game
Yep.
midway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
This was a close game. This is too close for comfort if you're Georgia. So, look, I've been on this pod talking about how I'm not convinced Georgia's by and large the best team in the country. And, I've kind of been stomping my feet a little bit for Michigan. And, I might still be on that after a big performance from them this week. But I just think this is what I'm talking about. Georgia doesn't put teams away the way that they used to. They don't dominate the way that they used to. They let teams hang around. This was 30-20 in the middle of the fourth quarter. So it's not like Georgia was, playing poorly. They still won by 17. That's fine. But you got to do more when you're playing teams like Vanderbilt. And I don't think that there is a for sure elite team this year in the SEC. I'm not sure that you can say that, right? I think that there's some really, really good teams. I think Georgia's really, really good. I think Alabama's really good. I think that LSU is pretty good. I think that there's some good teams in the SEC this year, but I don't think anybody is at that level of being elite. And when you look across the country, I think there's a lot of teams that right now would say, yeah, we'll take Georgia, right? If you're Washington, you're like, yeah, I'll take Georgia. I play
Yeah.
Georgia in a playoff game. I don't think they can score with us. If you're Michigan, you can say, yeah, I'll go toe to toe with Georgia. I think we can be more physical than them. If you're Ohio State, you sure want to, get your chance to go back against Georgia and do that. And so, you're looking at a lot of these teams vying for a playoff spot. Florida State, same way, Oklahoma, same way. I think all these teams aren't scared of Georgia this year the way that maybe you should be in previous years. Now, could Georgia, continue to shut us up and continue to find stuff? Maybe. Without Brock Bowers, I don't think you can. And so, I'm not sure where Georgia goes from here, but they got to find a way to, look like the old Georgia, which again, coaching staff is still there, so it could happen, but you got to look like old Georgia and you got to figure some stuff out quick.
Let's talk Alabama. Alabama survives a late push from Arkansas. They win 24-21. They were favored by 19 and a half. And at one point, it looked like they were going to get there. They were up by 11 in firm control, but some stops by the Arkansas defense. KJ Jefferson just willing that team forward. I mean, he's got no offensive line, and yet he is just being an Abrams battle tank running over defenders en route to scoring, 21 points. I mean, it felt like that was the maximum amount of points that Arkansas could have scored that game. Alabama, though, gets the win. It feels like they've steadied the ship, right? At no point did that game feel like it was in doubt. Arkansas just made it close at the end in a furious comeback attempt. My question is Alabama good enough to win out? Here's their remaining schedule. They'll take on Tennessee this next week at home. They host LSU. They go to Kentucky. That doesn't look like it's tough. They host Chattanooga, and then they go to Auburn. Now, say what you will about rivalry games. Auburn looks pathetic on offense right now. So, getting past these next 2 weeks, is that all Alabama really needs to do to go to Atlanta and have a shot at the college football playoff?
I think so. I think that all they got to do is get past Tennessee and LSU. And really, I'm going to go ahead and say I just think they got to get past LSU. Tennessee, from what we saw over the weekend, they beat A&M. Congratulations, but did not look good on offense doing it. Found ways to not get there, and not run the ball, in spots where I thought they should have. I thought there were lots of yards left on the table from Tennessee where they could have just chosen to run because A&M was giving them anything they wanted to do on the running game. But I think if you're Alabama, you just have to find a way to survive the LSU storm. I think LSU's offense can do what it wants to do. Alabama's got a really good defense, but you just got to find a way to tamp down this offense. And honestly, you got to find a way to keep up with the scoring because if you can hold LSU to, I'll say maybe 27 to 30 points, I think that's a great day for Alabama's defense. But can you get there if you're Alabama's offense? Can you get to 30? I don't know that they can. I don't know that they have the kind of weapons that they've had in previous years to get to a point where they can score with LSU. So it's not to say that LSU is all that special of a team. They don't have a defense really, but I just don't know that Alabama can take advantage of that on the offensive side of the football right now. So I think LSU is the big game to circle remaining on Alabama's schedule. Like you're saying, Kentucky doesn't scare you. Auburn definitely doesn't scare me at all. And then the throwaway with Chattanooga. So I think it's get past LSU and you're back in Atlanta.
Let's talk Missouri football. Missouri upsets Kentucky on homecoming. I put that in quotation marks because Kentucky was the ranked team coming in. They were the ones that were favored at home. And Missouri felt like they were disrespected. They got scheduled on homecoming and they came in and fell down early. They were down 14-0 after the Wildcats took an early lead. But the defense, the balance attack from the Missouri offense, good enough to get it done. We'll talk about that more in just a second. I think we need to be talking to our kids about a 10-win Missouri Tigers team. They host South Carolina. They go on bye. They go to Georgia. They host Tennessee. They host Florida. They go to Arkansas. Missouri's got 6 wins right now. Dare I say, Garrett, Missouri can win all but the game against Georgia. We could be talking about a 10, maybe even an 11 win Missouri Tigers team. I think their defense has stepped up in all the right ways. The offense, when Brady Cook's not airing it out, they have enough of a running game, enough of an ability to move the football to where if I'm looking at this, I think there's a really good chance that Missouri can get into a New Year's Six game. Now, the SEC East may literally come down to that game against Georgia, which whomst among us had Missouri and Georgia contending for the SEC East crown, but that may be where we are right now.
Well, I mean, we all had Georgia, but nobody had Mizzou.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
it's and for me, this is exactly what you're saying. The defense came up clutch, right? They had 4 sacks in this game. They had 6.5 tackles for loss in this game. And nothing about Missouri's offense looked that scary, right? It wasn't like Luther Burden. Luther Burden was held in check, 2 catches, 15 yards.
Yeah.
I think their leading rusher had like 7. I'm going to go check this, but I think he had like 70 yards rushing on the ground. That's not a terrible 71. That's not a terrible game rushing by any mean, but that's not electric stuff. And they put up 38 points. They scored the last 18 points on Kentucky. They had 2 picks in this game as well. It was all the defense in this one, taking advantage of a Kentucky offense that just hasn't lived up to expectations. They held Ray Davis somewhat in check. Ray Davis had a good game, 20 carries, 128 yards, but Devin Leary, not a good game, 120 yards. He missed like half of his passes, threw 2 touchdowns, but 2 picks to go with it. Missouri's a good team. Missouri's a very good team. And look, if Georgia doesn't get their stuff together, Missouri can win that game. They almost did last year. And, if there's no Brock Bowers, if that injury, we're still have to wait and see what that injury looks like. But with no Brock Bowers, they could come in and win this game, right? They could, get stuff clicking on offense a little bit more than they did against Kentucky. And they could win this game against Georgia. They could have a quick start, kind of take advantage of one of those Georgia slow starts we've been talking about, and they can win this game. It's on the table for Missouri. They just got to go and take it. I'm excited to watch the finish of this season for the Missouri Tigers.
You mentioned the 2 interceptions. They had 3 total takeaways against a Kentucky team that just cannot afford to give the football away. 6 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. They have a rushing score from Brady Cook. They have a fake punt pass for a touchdown. I mean, the creativity of Eli Drinkowitz and company is what ultimately got this done. I'm I'm so excited to see what Missouri can do here down the stretch. I don't think it's that tough of a schedule. I mean, heck, Tennessee didn't look good yesterday in a winning effort over Texas A&M. Arkansas is broken. Florida, you never know what they're going to get, especially when they go on the road. Now they beat South Carolina yesterday. I kind of felt like South Carolina lost that game a little bit, but I'm not scared of South Carolina. I'm not scared of Tennessee. I'm not scared of Florida. I'm not scared of Arkansas. I think Missouri can do it. I think they can get to 10 wins minimum on this season. Wrapping up the SEC, Jimbo Fisher, not a winner. Not a winner.
Yep.
Loses to Tennessee on the road. That's 8 straight road losses for Texas A&M. The Aggies have not well, I say the Aggies. Jimbo Fisher has not beaten a ranked opponent on the road since 2016. This game was handed to A&M so many times, and the offensive line was terrible. The defense got left out to dry. I mean, you allowed 20 points on the road. You hold Joe Milton to less than 100 yards passing, and you lose the game. Um, this team's inability to make any sort of adjustments makes us pull our hair out. I think Steve Adazio certainly needs to leave. The offensive line is one of the worst in college football statistically, and there is no excuse for that when your entire offensive line is 4 and 5 stars.
I think this is the death nail, the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for Jimbo Fisher's tenure at A&M. I don't think you can come back
Welcome,
from this.
welcome.
It's over. It's just you cannot after this convince. I don't think the majority of the fan base that Jimbo Fisher is the guy. There was so many people throughout Aggie Twitter that, and I was watching it, came completely off the tracks, right? Several guys just saying that Jimbo Fisher is not the guy anymore. And how could he be, right? You have a first drive touchdown for Texas A&M that, you go down, you score, congratulate, hit a big play, and that's your formula, right? Go throw the ball to your big play receivers, find a way to punch it in from there. And what do they do the rest of the game? None of that. None of
That was
that
the
at
only
all.
touchdown they scored.
They didn't score a touchdown the rest of the game. They scored 6 more points. They kicked 2 more field goals. They didn't try at the end of the second half, once again, second week in a row, that you get the ball, or at least could have had the ball with more than a minute on the clock left, and you don't try to go score a touchdown or at least kick a field goal, right, to put a few points on the board. You can complain about officiating all you want to. I saw some A&M fans complain about officiating. You can complain about all you want to. If your coach doesn't want to win,
It was
coach
bad
doesn't
on
want to
both
win.
sides. It was
Right.
bad.
It happens on both sides. It's the SEC officiating is garbage every week, anyways. They're going to miss calls all over the place. It's going to happen. But look, you can complain about all you want to. Jimbo Fisher can't do it. I don't know what it is, but that he's missing, right? He's got the championship pedigree. He's got all the money that you could want in the world. He's got everything that you want to facilities wise, and he can't put a good product on the field. He can't adjust. He can't find the way to, say, oh, well, this isn't working, so let's change it up. Oh, they're coming at us. They're getting past our O-line. Let's try to take advantage of that with some tunnel screens, right? Let's try to, take advantage of aggression. Let's find a way to get the ball out of the quarterback's hand fast. Can't do it. And for Max Johnson, who's processing a little slowly, or at least it looks like he's processing slowly, you need to get the ball out of his hand now. And Bobby Petrino ain't fixing it. And, Durkin, he's doing what he can. The defense wasn't terrible, but, they're getting what they wanted to when they decided to run the football. I can't remember too many times that A&M was effective against the rush. And so, you got to, admit at this point, I think that this is, it for Jimbo Fisher at A&M. I don't know if he gets fired this year. The buyout's crazy. So it may not be this year that he actually gets fired. But I think, dead man walking, lame duck head coach at this point. And it's going to be tough times in A&M until they turn a new leaf. It's just going to be tough times. And until then, Tennessee, I didn't think they looked that good. I really didn't think they looked like that good of a team. They played decently. They ran the ball effectively. The defense looked good against a bad A&M offense. And so I guess you can kind of hang your hat on that, but they didn't put up a whole bunch of points. I feel like they left a lot of points on the board as well. So, it's just a bad time to be an A&M fan. And Tennessee's got to shape up a little bit in a hurry. They should have been able to take advantage of a bad A&M secondary a lot more than they did. and they couldn't figure that out. So Tennessee's got to figure something else out in the pass game, or there's going to be some more losses on the schedule for them.
Mhm. LSU drubbed Auburn 48-18. Listen, the offense for LSU, we know that. Heisman level performance from Jaden Daniels week in, week out. The secondary did not look great for LSU, and that's saying something against an Auburn team that can't throw the football. Certainly concerned about that going forward for the Tigers. That's why I think Alabama is going to be able to win that game. Jalen Milroe seems to be coming into his own. I think he might torch some of those DBs for the Tigers. Florida, as I mentioned earlier, scores 10 in the final 4 minutes to beat South Carolina 41-39. Not a great look for Shane Beamer and company. They're 2-4. We talked about this in the preseason. We were all out on South Carolina's hype machine. This 9-3, 10-2 chatter just seemed too rich for this season. And sure enough, they're going to be fighting to make a bowl game at this point. I don't know that there is a real easy road to a bowl game, to a postseason this year. Again, I don't think that I'm down on the program. I'm not down on the direction of the Gamecocks, but gosh, everyone's just got to pump the brakes a little bit. And I think they're getting very similar to Colorado. They're getting that gut check here 6 games into the season. Let's go over to the Big Ten. You once again get to trot out the victory parade. Michigan wins 52-7 over Indiana. The Hoosiers were up 7-0 in this game. I tweeted, okay, Michigan, now do the thing where you play the good football. And they did that. They scored 52 unanswered. Ohio State wins 41-7 over Purdue. Purdue stinks. And Penn State manhandles UMass 63-0. Any takeaways from the top 3 teams in the Big Ten? Really the only 3 elite teams, championship contenders in this conference.
I'm going to continue to say I think Michigan is the best team in the country. I know that they're not playing anybody, but they're just handling them. And this is a couple times now where, a team scores a quick touchdown on Michigan because they, get the ball and, oh my gosh, Michigan's down 7-0. It seems like a lot of people at ESPN really want Michigan to lose games and to overhype it, because it seemed like that was the only highlight I saw anytime we cut away was, oh, look, Indiana's up 7-0. Look at that. It's going to be over. Michigan's done. And then what do? They just go score 58 points and say, see ya. And so, congrats, Michigan. I still think you're the best team in the country. I think that, at this point, I'd probably put Washington at number 2, maybe Oklahoma 3, Georgia 4. This would probably be where I put my top 4 right now. But yeah, Michigan, you're looking pretty fantastic. And, as much as I'm known as the Ohio State hater, Ohio State looks pretty good. They're playing some good football. And, I think that they could. I think it's going to be another fantastic, game of the year at the end of the season. I'm really excited for what that game is going to end up looking like between Michigan and Ohio State. I'm really excited for that one. It's going to be a fantastic game. And you can't count out Penn State. I just don't think they're quite at that level with Michigan and Ohio State right now. They could shut me up very quickly. But, I don't think they're quite at that level with those other 2 teams. But it'll be a fun end of the season in the Big Ten.
Rutgers completes an 18-point comeback against Michigan State. Kyle Monagai, 148 yards and a touchdown, the electric running back for Rutgers. I pointed this out in the preseason. I wrote their preview. I said, if Rutgers can get anything from their offense, this defense is a top 30 defense. That alone should get them to bowl eligibility. And ladies and gentlemen, Rutgers right there, a chance to play for their postseason eligibility after a win over Michigan State. The Spartans had this wrapped up, but they give up 18 straight points, a couple of special teams blunders. They allow a touchdown on a botch, trouble with the snap. I mean, how the tables turn there. And then Rutgers outgains Michigan State 120 yards to -20 in the fourth quarter. Garrett, I don't think going backwards is the way to win in college football.
Look, I've heard a lot of theories on how you win. That's not one of them,
No.
right? And going negative is not one of them. I'm really impressed with Rutgers. They're playing really good football, really physical football. We kind of talked about it earlier in the year. They play kind of that same style that Michigan plays, where they're just going to say, I'm going to beat you physically. I'm going to run the ball down your throat. And it sure worked. They scored the last 21 points of the game in the fourth quarter, and they go on to win this one. I'm really excited to see what's ahead for them. I'm curious to see kind of maybe how the rest of the schedule plays out for them. I don't know that they can beat some of those top teams, but I think that they're a really, really good team that could end up, pushing for a solid bowl game.
Mhm, mhm. Iowa, they're in the driver's seat now in the Big Ten West after an ugly, ugly game, a 15-6 win over Wisconsin. Iowa wins again with Deacon Hill throwing for 37 yards. LaShawn Williams wins it for them on the ground. He carries for a buck 74. The Dairy Raid offense looks beyond broken. If Braylon Allen isn't going for 200 yards, this Wisconsin team just isn't a contender to beat the big boys. And Iowa has the 10th best scoring defense now in the entire country.
I just have to say at this point that this was so disgusting. I put this game in my ledger pick, and I said that this was my for the love of the game pick. They had an over
Yep.
under of 32, and I said if you can't find a way to scratch out 32 points between the two of you, then that's just disgusting. And what did they do? They scored 3 touchdowns together, right? The
Yep.
15 to 6, they hit 21. That's disgusting. They should both be ashamed of themselves. Brian Ferentz going to lose his job. He's nowhere close. He had to be at 175 at the end of this game. I think he's at like 140. He's going to lose his job. And he probably deserves it because, look, Iowa, like, this is a proud program. This is a good program. They have one of the best defenses in the country. And I think you could still take most teams across the country and say, yeah, they probably have a chance against Iowa. Can you find 20 points? Yeah, if you can find 20 points, you can beat Iowa. And so it's, and I know they have a really good defense, and so that'd be hard to do for some teams. But man, just shameful, just shameful. I'm not a fan of what I saw there. They got to get better. Both teams got to play better football going forward. I don't call that football.
uh, I don't know that we can call what Maryland did football either. They lose to a bad Illinois team at home, 27-24. This is just kind of what Maryland does. Everyone starts to buy in, and then they get out of September and they forget how to play football. That's a bad Illinois team they just lost to at home.
You broke my turtles, Mitch.
Sorry,
You
man.
put them in. You put them in your ledger, and you broke my turtles. It's okay. Now this is a bad loss. This is not good for Maryland. Technically speaking, the 10-win season is still on the table, but I am not nearly as confident as I was in that happening before this. So
That was a big one. You needed to beat
you
Illinois to
needed
get there.
3-4 Illinois or 2-4 going into this game. You need 2-4 into this game, Illinois, to get to that 10-win season, probably. So not fantastic. Certain of our colleagues may be free of their shoe eating, dares from the beginning of the
I
season.
think
So
so. I
yeah, they
think
might
so.
be okay. I still think this is a good Maryland team. They can still finish the season well, but you got to get past that one.
Yeah. We'll skip through the Big 12 really quickly because I want to talk Group of Five. Nothing really to mention in the Big 12, as I mentioned, outside of Oklahoma State beating Kansas. Texas and Oklahoma were both on a bye. Thursday night, when I was calling Duncanville and Mansfield, Steve Sarkeesian and Jeff Banks were actually there in attendance to watch a couple of their high school commits play. So that was
Yeah.
fun to see. But yeah, without Texas and OU playing, not much to mention. Ollie Gordon had his breakout game for the Pokes. This was a wild offensive shootout. 168 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He also had 108 receiving yards. Might need to check that. But rarefied air for Ollie Gordon. He was the first running back in Oklahoma State history, I believe, to hit that plateau. And so, for Oklahoma State, look, I thought they were dead. I thought they were 6 feet under, and now back-to-back wins over Kansas schools. It's a sunflower shutout.
Yeah, let me tell you, man. Tease up Ollie Gordon. Shout out to you, my guy. 35 total touches in this game, and he almost hit 300 yards from scrimmage, two
Yep.
touchdowns. Look, just fantastic job for that young man. Super proud of him. And look, if he's going to be the catalyst for this, kind of resurgent, Oklahoma State team, then congratulations. It's good. I still don't think that they have a whole lot to play for at this point. I don't think that they're a very good team overall. But if Ollie Gordon can get things rolling, then things can work out for them. He's a really special back, and obviously beating Kansas in a game where Jason Bean played really, really well, right?
Yep, he
410
did.
yards, 5 touches. He threw 2 picks, but like he was slinging that thing. I just kind of shocked at how much they held Kansas down in the run game. But congratulations, Oklahoma State. You absolutely deserve that one. And we'll see where you can go from here. Not too optimistic, but we'll see. They could put something together here at the end of the season.
Elsewhere, you've got Iowa State finally flexing some offense, 30-10. I guess I made the case that, hey, if Cincinnati can score anything on offense, they might be a decent team. They neither scored nor stopped anybody for the Cyclones yesterday. TCU destroys BYU with a backup quarterback, 44-11. Uh, Most of us were on BYU, and it didn't really even give this game a second thought. And TCU came out and punched the Cougars in the mouth. Really, another kind of tough day for newcomers in the Big 12. Kansas State shellacks Texas Tech 38-21.
I guess
Red
they real
Raiders.
quick. I
Yep.
don't think that BYU showed up to that game. There were so many BYU fans. I saw at Railhead Barbecue in Fort Worth. We were out there for lunch. Saw so many BYU fans. I think there might have been some players sprinkled into that group that apparently just did not get off the bus to play this game. TCU throttled it. It was a gross display from BYU.
Yeah, it was why make the trip, basically. All right, group of five to wrap. To end this show, the Sun Belt was fascinating this week because you had Coastal Carolina stunning Appalachian State 27-24. That was on a Tuesday night. Despite the offensive struggles for Coastal without Jamie Chadwick, they managed to get it done in a raucous atmosphere at Kid Brewer Stadium. James Madison routs Georgia Southern. They would not only be the conference favorites at this point, they're 6-0. They would be a New Year's Six favorite and maybe even a playoff contender, except for that NCAA rule that doesn't allow them to participate in the postseason for 2 years after joining the FBS. They are now 24-3 since joining the FBS ranks. It is an absolute shame that they can't participate in the postseason.
Just disgusting. And I mean, a fantastic game all the way around. Jordan McLeod, fantastic. 3 touchdowns, 259. Through the air, Elijah Surratt, 105 receiving in that one and a touchdown. And how about that defense? 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 3 picks in that game. Great effort all the way around from James Madison. And yeah, you're right. Like, just to not be able to compete at that high level when they clearly deserve it, I think it's disgraceful. I think that they should be able to, suspend these stupid of all the rules that the NCAA could have. This isn't the one to have, right? There's so many rules they could say, oh, well, do we want to find a way to stop NIL from getting out of control? Maybe find a way to keep some conferences together so that things don't completely slide out of bounds. Nah, let's stop James Madison from playing in the Cotton Bowl or something like that. Like, let's just stop them from playing in a big game that they deserve to play in. I don't get it, but okay, NCAA, whatever.
Just another way that they are not clearly not looking out for their student athletes. We've got Georgia State staying alive at the top of the conference. They crush Marshall 41-24. Texas State needs a late comeback, but they get it done over Louisiana Monroe 21-20. And Troy shuts out Army 19-0. So what this means is because James Madison isn't eligible to win the Sun Belt East, to win a conference championship, you've got Georgia State, Texas State, and Troy kind of is the favorites at the top of the Sun Belt. That was a big loss for Appalachian State. Not gonna lie, 4-2 versus 3-3. That's a big time difference in the conference. But the Sun Belt again, just proving to be one of the best conferences, not only entertainment wise, but honestly quality in college football. The East is absolutely loaded. And then the West, as I mentioned, Troy, Texas State, and then Louisiana, they were off this week. It's going to get really fun. If you're not already watching Sunbelt football, now is the time to tune in.
Yeah, man. And I think of all the teams of that group that I would expect to do something here, I think I'm going to favor Troy going out. Kamani Vidal is a beast on the ground. He's just a threat on the ground. And I just think that you have to acknowledge what they do on defense plus what they can do in the run game. I just think that's a really good team at Troy. There's some really solid teams in the Sun Belt. That's not to take away from anybody right now. I
Yeah.
just think Troy has the best squad right now. And it's going to be fun to watch the way that this thing ends up. It's going to be must-see TV, I think, on the way out because, as we get to the back part of the season, teams are starting to separate a little bit. And this is a really competitive and really fun race to watch.
Yeah, Troy only has 2 losses. They lost a close one to James Madison, which I mentioned doesn't really affect things. They got throttled by Kansas State earlier in the year, but outside of the conference, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter a lick. They gave up 24 to Western Kentucky back in week 4. Since then, they've given up 7 to Georgia State, 3 to Arkansas State, and they just shut out Army. They've got a big date with Texas State coming up in 2 weeks' time. They're on bye, so definitely pay attention to that one. Big Sunbelt implications on the line on Halloween weekend. Over in the Mountain West, maybe the game of the week in the group of 5 was Air Force winning over Wyoming 34-27. This was a 14-0 lead for the Wyoming Cowboys before Air Force stormed back before halftime. John Lee Eldridge has a couple of scores for Air Force. He has the 58-yard touchdown run with 2 minutes 30 seconds left to win it for the Cadets. Wyoming finally got bit by the special teams bug. They beat who was it? They beat App State a couple of weeks ago, blocking a field goal, returning it for a touchdown. It didn't end up mattering, but in the moment, having an extra point blocked to prevent them from going up 28-27 felt like the tables had turned, the pendulum had swung. I take away from this, Air Force is not just the favorite from the group of 5 to make a New Year's Six bowl, but Garrett, honestly, there's a chance that they pull a Tulane. The way that they're playing, I think they could get up and beat somebody at their USC this year. The Falcons are a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and a big part of that is just their style. If you run the football, that travels really, really well.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to run the football effectively, they had, a guy carry for 111 yards, a guy carry for 97, a guy carry for 65, a guy carry for 62. I
Yeah.
mean, these are just big numbers to put up. And, you look at this and you say, hey, is this going to travel? Well, it sure could. It sure could. If you go and you play a team, let's say that they take USC, right? If they go and play USC in a big game, USC doesn't have much of a defense, so if they're able to just run the ball, keep Caleb Williams off the field, they can win that game. And then you start to take that logic, expand it out to, let's say, LSU. LSU doesn't have that good of a defense. Could they run the ball and keep Daniels off the field? Could they keep any of these teams off the field? Yeah, they sure can. And so you give me Air Force, they're a fun team to watch. They're fun to watch, kind of go and kind of dominate, play their style of football. It's always just kind of fun when you have a service academy that's good at football anyways, and can be competitive. So
Yep.
shout out Air Force, good for you guys. College football's better because of y'all, and I'm kind of excited to see how they finish the season too.
In the American, let's wrap up. Tulane keeps their New Year's Six hopes alive. They beat Memphis 31-21. Garrett, our old friend Yul Keith Brown with the go-ahead touchdown to secure Tulane an inside track to the American Championship game. It seems like their potential opponent, SMU, is 2-0 in conference play. They destroyed Eastern Carolina 31-10 over the weekend. SMU did not get out to the start in non-conference play they wanted to. They did not kind of capitalize on all that offseason momentum, but a Ponies Green Wave matchup still very much alive in the AAC. I think that's the matchup we should be rooting for as fans. A great defense in Tulane, a very fun offense in SMU, who's also come a long way defensively. To me, I think that would be the best quality that we could get.
Oh, for sure. It's a fantastic matchup, and that's the one that I'm rooting for. I mean, especially as us, our season ticket holders over here for SMU. That's
True.
you got to root for the guys that you hold the tickets for. So
Amen.
that's good. That's a lot of fun. No, it would be a fun one to watch, and probably an all-time uniform matchup as well, because both teams sport fantastic uniforms, and so I'm rooting for that. I think that Tulane right now is the better team of the two. I think that they've got a lot more going on both sides of the football. I give maybe SMU's offense a slight edge to Tulane right now, but I would say slight. I just think Tulane's a better defense by a pretty good margin. And I think they'd end up winning that game, but I want to see it. I want to watch that one on the field, and that would be one of my, must-watch games of the year. So, I think, it's going to be fun to see. Again, this is what I keep saying. It's going to be fun to watch how this season finishes, because there's so many fun results. There's a lot of really good teams to watch. It's not like in previous years where you have, this is our team of the conference, and the rest of the conference is kind of bad. There's a lot of really good teams in some of these G5 conferences where it's not just Tulane and everybody else, right? It's Tulane plus SMU. It's, you got, Texas State, but also Troy over there in the Sun Belt. You got Air Force, and then Wyoming. They just beat a good Wyoming team. But you've also got, Fresno State and other really good teams out there in the Mountain West. So I think there's some really good teams in these G5, conferences, and they need a lot more love than they're getting right now, because this is going to be where some of the most fun football is played on the back half of the season.
No doubt. It's going to be exciting. The back half of the season is here, which is a bummer because college football is getting towards being, closer we're officially closer to ending than we are from starting, but this is what you wait for, right? This is where it all really the rubber meets the road, and a lot of championship contenders still alive, especially in the conference ranks, and that's what we're here for. Let us know, of course, who you are pulling for in week 8. We will have our full week 8 preview Thursday morning, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. We'd love to have you aboard. If you are a new listener, a new guest, hit that subscribe button. It certainly helps us out. And we can't wait to talk to you with a new preview coming up. Of course, our live shows go every Saturday night. This was a kind of a one-off. All three of us we're traveling, doing things last night. But normally our live shows start about 10:30 Central Time on Saturday night. We would love to have you join us there live. If you're listening to the podcast, watching the stream after the fact, come hang out, talk ball. It's a great time, and we can't wait to see you there. For Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging with us. Until next time, so long, everyone.
Gracious him. How about